We got more bounce in California than all y'all combined.
Tuesday the 13th here today, and working on a 2005 wagon touring in silver on M parallels, staggered 30 styles 37, almost at 37 inches. This thing's been converted to a manual, and the guy had that done and then decided to change the pixels or change the cluster because the pixels were bad, and they most certainly are. Very difficult to read. So his approach at that, unfortunately, was buying a used cluster that had good pixels and putting that in, realizing it needed to be coded. He took it to the BMW dealership. They coded the entire car back to automatic, and then said, "Oh, we didn't build. You mean BMW didn't build a manual wagon? Well, we don't know how to do that. That's not in our software. That's aftermarket. So you're gonna have to find somebody else who can. And the shop that built this car is on the other side of the country." So that's when it came in here. I've been so busy for the past few weeks with other projects, we haven't gotten to it. Today I decided it's the day to fix this thing. So found a whole bunch of stuff online, read up on it, did the ZCS coding on the IKE or cluster and the EWS, and seemingly that was all right. I had a bunch of issues coding the car. It would get to the GM3. Well, it got to the LWR and then said that the module wasn't communicating. That was an easy fix. You have to turn the headlights on to wake up the LWR. Then it would get to the GM3 and that wasn't working because I was in the wrong profile. You have to be in expert mode factory settings for that to work for whatever reason. So finally it went through the code car, process car bit. Then you try to align the DME and EWS and you get all these errors. I looked into that. I just could not get the EWS and DME to align. So I asked him if we can try a EWS code out. He said, okay. So we did a full read of the DME, put it in my ME 7.2 software over here, made a version of the DME software that doesn't have the EWS enabled, did the checksum correction on it, found 4 bad checksums, flashed that to the car, still wouldn't start. But that got rid of my DME EWS adaptation or tamper code that would come up every time you tried to start the car in the EWS and DME. So I'm thinking, what the hell else can cause this to not start? Well, the clutch switch. So I plug in PA Soft and come in here and disable the clutch switch, and boom, thing starts up for the first time in like 3 months. But that doesn't match the story. He said it was running and driving fine. He drove it to the dealership, had them work on the cluster, and that's when it stopped working because of the coding issues. But what we have here is some sort of a mechanical problem. So let's take a look up in here and we'll see that the E39 uses a completely different clutch switch system compared to the E60. And I've not converted an E39 to a manual yet, though it's a service I'd like to offer. This is the early style pre-2001 clutch switch, which should be applicable in this car. It's an 1299 build, 2000 model year, 540 touring, and it uses a 2-pole connector, but part of that connector is broken off right here. So you press the clutch in and it depresses that switch, but there's another switch at the top that when the clutch is out in its relaxed position, I can't even see on camera, but there's another switch that looks just like that white one there up top, and neither switch are stuck. They're both adjusted right. They both have wires going in and out of them, but all of this wiring is, well, a little messy to say the least. The wiring that we do here is about as factory as you can get without replacing the entire harness. We got pieces falling off. I don't even know what this is. It just fell out. This wire is far too long, and as I'm moving it, I hear it moving like up around the column. The ground switch, or the ground pin for that plunger right here, is actually grounded over to the booster. There's a spade on the bottom right side of the booster there, and that's where they chose to ground it. It works. It's not great. You got wires going up above your brake booster. I don't like that at all from a safety perspective. So I think my recommendation to the customer is going to be, yes, I can fix it, but it's going to be several hours to remove the lower dash, study the wiring diagrams and the pinouts, get access to the EWS, check all those connections. And the wires that are going into this switch here are not even, it's not in a connector. They're just shoved onto the pins, not making great continuity. So I don't know who did this. It seemed to be in a big hurry with budget being the motivating factor, which is unfortunate because this is actually a really nice 540 wagon example here. It's got sport seats in it. Now it's a 6-speed. He's got cubic trim or technical graphite trim in there, heated seats. I don't like the aftermarket radio. That was another issue I ran into when coding the car. So I come back here and I can't figure out how to get into the hatch. You press this and you hear something move, and you press that one and nothing happens. You press the button there by the hood switch, and that doesn't do anything. So you got to crawl back here and pull that cable and open it manually, and then you get into the trunk. Yep, there's trims missing all over the place. Style 32. Well, the amp wasn't plugged in because the amp has been totally modified, all the wires cut. It's a major mess back here. Someone's put in an aftermarket head unit, and it was getting stuck on the DSP coding portion of the code car, and NCS saying that, hey, the DSP amp's not communicating. So I go back there and it's not plugged in. Thankfully, they didn't cut the bus wires going in and out of it or the power supply. So I plugged those two in, got the DSP amp online, which was important for the whole code car procedure. So I think the coding is right. There's wiring issues or still EWS issues. You should be able to delete the EWS, which I've done, from the DME, but still have it function for the clutch switch. Because right now you can start it without pressing the clutch, which means you could start it in gear and the thing would roll. Take a look at this. So starts right up. Most of the lights go out. It does complain about the self-leveling suspension, don't they all? That noise you hear is the pump in the back trying to pump up the rear end. And not really succeeding. The bags are probably leaking. It's got a flywheel in it that rattles like crazy, and it just smells like burning oil. Typical M62 things. So, nothing else. You got it running. The Z8's been a major pain in the ass today. Yesterday we started removal of the rear struts. The problem is the strut towers are pretty much under the top mechanism and in the rear parcel shelf, for lack of better terms. So we had to take out a whole lot of the interior here, the roll bar protection things, the leather panels that go back there, which are still held captive by the seat belt, so they're carefully sitting here. The trunk is full of parts. You have to take all the hoses. It's a hydraulically actuated top, so all of that's taken apart. Pump / motor / reservoir for the top is over there, and this is all in TIS that it has to come out. Then Mike gets in here this morning and finds if you take off those little plastic panels and pull the carpeting back, boom, there's your strut towers. You don't have to take any of that shit apart. So why is NCS coming up with an additional 6-8 hours of work here? Now we got to bleed the top out, figure out what kind of hydraulic fluid it uses. Major pain in the rear. But the good news is front billies are installed. We're about to get some rotors on here. He's actually authorized new ones that'll be coming in tomorrow. The adjustment's right there at the bottom, so that'll be nice and easy to adjust at pretty much any point. You just need to get under the car and get some access. The front suspension's going back together. Very similar to the E39, we've got 2 piston calipers on the front, which are nice. A little bit different geometry. It's actually notably easier. Front subframe is aluminum. Of course, we have a steering rack in here as opposed to a box. So you get an S62 in a rack, which is great. Sway bar installs upside down in the subframe. So look at the beautiful Super Sprint exhaust that we've got on, from exhaust valves all the way back to tailpipes. It's got the expansion springs there. This side was leaking a touch, so we need to move this clamp forwards about 1/4 inch. Uses the same center exhaust brace. I love all the wire management under here. Every 4 inches you get a little clip to keep the O2 sensor wires nice and neat. It's all really pretty. Got another bracket up here for your post-cat electrical connection. Resonators here. We're close to these heat shields, but I can get a finger in there. Fitment's pretty darn good. And then back to the boxes here. He elected to go with the ones that are a stagger cut, so they'll match the facade of the bumper the way it pulls in here, so that should look real nice. Super Sprint for the Z8. On the E39, you've got to remove the rear fender liners to get access, to get the struts in and out. Here you don't, at least on the right side. We did on the left side, following the TIS instructions, because you've got to get to the hydraulic top lines, which live right here. And again, absolutely no reason to disassemble that. Took in another GS653BZ today. I've got 3 of them. That's going to go in a low mileage M6. That's in an 08 M5. This is in an 06 M5. They're all scheduled a few weeks out to be coming in for manual conversions. That's a pretty penny though. Good thing we lock up. Sterling 2002 M5. This is the one that's got issues with the sunroof. It's a whole thing. When you raise the sunroof, there's a little piece back here, like in vent mode, that comes and pushes this lever up. And there's supposed to be a plastic piece. In fact, here's part of it down under there. This plastic piece, this little hinge in between my fingers, goes in this groove. And this keeps the front part down as the rear levers up. This is the fulcrum. That plastic piece is broken. So when the rear levers up, The front doesn't hinge anymore, so it just does that, and the glass barely moves. That also means the glass is very loose, and with the sunroof fully in its closed position, you can push from the inside and the glass rattles up and down. Over any bumps on the highway, it's really annoying. You have all this metallic-y, glass, plasticky noise overhead of the sunroof bouncing around because those pieces are broken. Good news is BMW sells that as a repair kit, in addition to, I believe, this piece and some plastics that are back here. Bad news is, to service it, you have to take the sunroof cassette out of the car, which involves removing the A, B, and C pillars and, oh God, a whole bunch of other stuff inside the car. All the grab handles, visors, HomeLink panel, light, everything up there. So it's pretty labor intensive. And then another few hours to pull the cassette out of the car, drainage tubes, wiring, motor, a million torque screws, and then it only fits out the front door. May or may not have to take the seats out. Earlier today on the driver's side, I decided to see if I could follow a video online that talked about how to get those pieces out without taking the cassette out, and I was largely successful. Here's this piece. The more difficult piece to come off is in here, and it's this one. This one's too long and it runs into the little pop-up thing here, wind deflector. So I actually took the arm off the wind deflector, which is this guy, and it installs like this. Backside has this hammer that pushes in those two clips in front of those rivets, to the left of the rivets. So like, if I were to push that, it would snap in place. So you have to pry that out forwards first. There's 15 minutes. Reason is, the pin on the end of this is keyed, and it goes in the deflector, has to be in this position, then it rotates down. If I try to take it out of there now, the key prohibits that, so it's got to swing up and then come out. None of this is supposed to come apart with the cassette in the car. It kind of does, but the problem is you won't be able to slide in a new one of these because it's got to firstly hinge in this arm, which is captive. It moves up and down, but not forwards and backwards. And I have the motor adjusted all the way in its closed position right now. So I'd have to figure out how you take this arm out. I see a torque screw, but there's a pin that has to be hammered out. Major pain. So why take this out and put hours into disassembling it and attempting to clean it and replace some of the plastic components on a brittle car? My recommendation to the customer is that if we're going to do this, if you're going to commit to the labor to drop the entire headliner, I want to put a new cassette in and have everything new and just have it work and be quiet and not click. And that's a big enough pain in the ass to replace it. So E39 sunroof cassette, unpleasant. 10 o'clock, time to go. Last few hours here, organization cleanup and an M5 cleanup for the first time in several weeks. Standard in and outside, just lots of bug guts, lots of bee poop, dust, road debris. The little drainage thing out in front of the shop just runs after it, like a wet winter like this. That will literally run until October. So even if you go through that at 3 miles an hour, it just kicks stuff up and down the side of the car. So nice and shiny, nice and blue again. That's fantastic. We already talked about everything going on here today. So we'll just cut today here. Tomorrow I'm expecting some hardware so we can finally get the front bumper on this car. We did get the strut. The strut is on. It's just going to be a matter of adjusting that during the installation process so the gaps look good and it's nice and tight and fits correctly. That bumper's over here, and the problem is these little axial retaining clips that hold the grill in, and they're supposed to be round, and I put the last 12 I had that I bought 10 years ago on this car. The bumper ended up getting repainted. We weren't happy with the first time, and we were in a hurry to get it there, so it went in like this. I didn't have time to disassemble it myself, and we told the trusted paint guys, do not break or lose those clips. And he's like, oh yeah, my body guys are fine. They never break anything. I lost them all. Every single one of them. You cannot buy them. I've searched Germany, I've searched the rest of Europe, I've searched the US, 12 different suppliers, and LA, gone, doesn't exist anymore. Well, how hard can it be to find a little push nut? Like these are just from McMaster Car or something like that. And the body shop just put 3 of those on. They're like, oh yeah, it's good, it's not going anywhere. I'm not putting 3 fasteners on somewhere where there's supposed to be 10. So now I've ordered like 6 different kinds to try to find those that work okay. They're aftermarket, but what am I going to do? Call BMW and say I'm going to buy a million of these to make it worth your time? Can't do it. That's where it is. Talk to you guys on hump day.